Appreciate the opportunity to come today. I thought yesterday was a great opportunity for us to get to know each other in a little creative way. Today, we hope, as Amber described, to work through the variables that define a successful remodel. And we're going to ask a lot of questions of these two experts here, and they're going to give us their answers. And hopefully we'll have a lot of great ideas and takeaways that we can bring home with us after this discussion. We have really 5 main points that we're going to work through, and our goal is to make this an interactive discussion. So we're going to be reaching out to you guys in the audience to ask questions and hopefully extract as much information out of these experts as possible. We'll work through that 5 outline discussion point. We have 60 minutes to do that. We'll have about 10 minutes on each point. From there, we'll roll into our generalized outline, and these are the 5 main points as it relates to the remodel roadmap. First, we're going to talk about what is a remodel. We'll define it through their eyes in each of their organizations of what a remodel is. We'll go into the charter and approval process. What steps do you go through to set this up internally to get it approved to move forward? After that, what are the important planning and development steps? What variables do you encounter? What are the risks, the challenges? We'll also talk a little bit about execution and delivery, and then finally close out turnover and how do we measure whether a project was successful. 3 things that I want all of us to kind of commit to as it relates to this particular panel discussion, what I call the panel rules. 3 points. Number 1, this is an interactive discussion. So whatever we hope to get out requires us to put something in. So everybody out there, be thinking of your questions. I want everybody to look, I guess it would be to your right. So everybody look to your right. I want to see a bunch of heads looking to your right. For those folks that are on that end, you're lucky because you don't have any expectation or requirement out of this session. Everybody in between, your job is to ensure that your neighbor asks a good question. Okay? So poke them, whatever is the appropriate way to ensure that they ask a good question, that's your responsibility. Okay? So remember who that person looks like. Make sure you're close enough to them so you can give them a jab and have them ask a good question. Second important rule, we have 60 minutes. We're going to need to be efficient as we go through this discussion. I want to make sure we get full circle on all the points that we have to discuss. And then lastly, this is a big one for me and the teams that I lead, is it's important for us that as we have these key takeaways, that we put them into action. We come to a lot of these types of events, we interact with smart people. That doesn't do any good unless we take what we learned and actually do something with it. And so that's the second thing that I would ask everybody in this room to commit to is if you learn something great, if it's a new idea, jot it down and make the effort to put it into action as you go off into your worlds and execute against either projects or leading teams that are building projects. That said, let's move on. Let's get started. So the first question that we have for you guys is the basic question, and that is to define a successful remodel or what a remodel is for you. And John Corless, if you want to go ahead and start, how do you define a remodel project?
It all depends. What's a remodel? We have 3 basic approaches that we try to use as a framework for thinking, and they're really about the scale and scope of what the remodel is or could be. And they're broken down into 3 basic groups. One set is the sort of remerchandising, which is a product-based. One we actually do call a remodel, which is a combination of low-level construction and new products. And the third one is renovation, which is what it sounds like. It's mostly a rip-out and fit-out. And so those 3 basic approaches offer us the opportunity really to categorize the remodel based upon scale and scope. And obviously, that leads us to cost and time and resources required, etc.
Okay, so for you guys, 3 main levels of remodel effort. Good question.
Well, it's a great question. How do you execute a remodel once you've decided what you are going to do? And that really depends upon 2 things for us. One is the scale of it. So if you have a 20,000 square foot store and you're going to remodel 19,000 square feet of it, then you might as well close it down. We're really sort of customer focused in our business, like most retailers are. We want to disturb the customers the absolute least. So we want to remodel, but we don't want to be seen or heard or smelled or anything else. So the big challenge for us is that key decision. How do we do it? How do we remodel? And we take a financial approach to looking at that question. Is our sales going to be affected, yes or no? If they are, how are they going to be affected? Are they going to be affected more if we close it and we have an absolute dimension to say, well, we're absolutely going to lose the sales because the store's closed? Or do we do this in piecemeal, phases? And really, that comes down to, can we forecast the sales loss? Which is a really important decision. So it's a great question about how you do it. Again, I go back to what I said earlier on, which is it depends on the scale and the scope.
John, how about for you guys?
Well, I would agree with him. I mean, there's certain levels, but we look at it a little bit different. Each store really has its own needs. We had different levels. We found that became very generic. With over 1,000 stores, we were limiting ourselves in what we needed to do, and frankly, in some cases, spending more money than we needed to spend. So we really look at going into the store and saying, all right, what do we really want to be? What is it we need? What are you seeing as a customer? And then really kind of deciding on that, because we used to have what we call a paint and patch, and then we get to a certain level, which is a fixture relay, and then a remodel, and then a major remodel. And so really go back to say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to the store? And I look at it more of not from a cosmetic standpoint, because remodels in my lifetime have not, just to make it pretty, don't really get you the return on investment that you need. So you have to say, what am I going to do additive to this store that's going to drive additional business? So if it's widening aisles, creating better visibility, adding queuing, different things that we could look at to improve, drive the business, maybe add some different business opportunities within the store. That's really what we're looking for. And then we decide based on that what the investment needs to be. And we have never shut a store down. So we have one right now and basically have a tunnel getting to the store. But interestingly enough, I have found that there's more interest in a store when you remodel it than there was prior to. So what I find, and like as this one store is one of our top stores out in California, business is only down a slight bit, and we're continuing to drive the daily operation. So, as
it relates to defining a remodel, there's lots of things you can do inside of a store. What are the typical scope items, maybe over the last 6 months, that each of you guys have seen as important focal points that you're focusing on relative to remodel efforts? Do you want to start?
So the design of the remodel is really important, I think, and there are many, many different approaches, and obviously matrix like the cost of it and how long it's going to take, and what's the sort of what's in scope and what's out of scope, all really, really important. There's a sort of there's a really sort of dynamic approach that you can take. We take a really sort of fast track approach to remodeling, because being part of a retail organization, it's all about speed to market. Once you've made the decision and the commitment, it's really about getting into the marketplace and and reaping the benefits. So to each remodel, there's a business component, there's a technical component, there's a resource component, there's a cost component, there's a time component. All of these things are really, really important milestones for you to understand and not just sort of breeze by. It's not just about something as arbitrary as costs per square foot. You can actually drill further down, and you can actually make much more open decisions than something as a broad sort.
As far as scope, lighting, fixtures, I mean, those are the typical things that you guys include in a remodel effort, correct?
Again, it depends. Go back to what I was saying earlier on. A remodel for us could be we're moving into a new category of products. Well, new products means new displays. means new fixtures, means new layout, means new lighting, means new flooring finishes perhaps, means new arrangements in the store, and so it goes on. And you've really got to look at the context of what you're trying to achieve in order to really define the scope. And once you've defined the scope, you can then attribute what are the key milestones, what are the key KPIs that you're going to measure.
Mm-hmm. We had John, Wyatt, we had an interesting conversation actually just right before here, and you mentioned something that I think would be really great for the audience to hear, and that was, we were talking about scope and how you guys were approaching a patch and paint versus something maybe more developed than that, more insightful as it relates to what you really want to get out of the end project, and really the longevity of the benefit. Do you want to share with the group kind of the ideas that you shared there relative to the time of how long you want to feel that impact, and maybe also share how do you set that vision? So you've got the definition of what the remodel is. How do you guys go out and set it to the teams and folks that are going to execute?
Well, I think you have to really understand your brand, obviously, and understand what it is that brand needs to be. And I think that might sound very nebulous, but when you're a customer, I always do this. I walk in a store and I say, what is it that is this? What is this store to this customer? What does it mean to me? What am I seeing when I'm walking in? And then I call it the wow factor. When you walk in that first 10 feet of any store, that sets the tone for what you expect out of this store. So if you really don't know what that store means in the first 10 feet, then they really haven't done a good job in a remodel and a presentation of that brand. So what we go back to is say, walk in that first 10 feet and say, what are we and what do we want the customers to think that we're an authority on? So we look at that, and as a result of that, then I will look at components of a store by department, by area. So for example, we have framing. So we look at that framing area. What does that need to be? If you're in the framing department, what does that feel like? What are all the components in there? What's the queuing area supposed to be? What is the first 10 departments, the top 10 departments of your assortment? What are they supposed to look like? And try to kind of have a kit of parts that these can move around, because each demographic is different, each area is different, the different spaces you get will align differently. But if you keep those components in some semblance of order, number one, it makes it less expensive for rollout across 1,000 stores, and then actually you can help expedite the process and working with the different vendors and having them understand what is needed. So we look at those different areas, and then pretty much the layer of lighting, visual graphics, and then merchandise, flooring, and so forth.
John?
Yes?
Obviously you have stores all across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have 1, 2, 3 teams that go in and make these assessments, or is it the store manager who's deciding what needs to be done? How do you execute that so that it's uniform across the country?
Well, what we do is, the process really was get input from our real estate people and from our regional vice presidents who are in operations. And I actually spent a lot of time on the road going with them and taking my designers with me and just kind of going through the top performing stores that we're looking at and the bottom performing stores, and really trying to assess, maybe 200 stores a year as to what the condition of those stores are and what we're going to do, what our next plan is. So, there's no need to look at 1,000 stores over in a year, thankfully. But I do look at quite a few every year and just kind of go in and try to assess those. And then once we get that set, we'll start rolling those out. So right now we're rolling out about 50 stores a year, and you can get into a lot of different areas and set those plans for yourself. But right now it's a lot about myself, my team really is understanding what the vision is and going out and doing that on a regular basis, on a daily basis. The key thing is getting input from the field. They'll tell you how bad their stores are. They'll tell you what the customer's not liking. And then I kind of go out on the weekends, or I'll go out during the week and just become a customer and walk around the store and end up talking to people. And I usually don't let people know I'm coming, so I just become kind of fit right in and see how the thing works.
There's another question right here.
Yes.
You mentioned a while back there, my experience with the first 10 feet when you walk into the store.
Mm-hmm.
What considerations do you give to the wow factor of customer experience on the exterior?
What was it last
The
part?
exterior of the store.
Right.
The wow factor of the customer experience, the impression on the exterior.
Well, a lot of that is based on what the city will let you do and what the landlord will let you do. But I think it really has to be clean. And again, we have stores in varying conditions. I mean, from, haven't been remodeled in 12 years to stores that look old and tired. And so our goal, I was brought into Michael's about 2 years ago, is really to upgrade the brand and to make sure that the brand reflects what it's supposed to be today. So we're going back, I think the first thing I did in the first 6 months is we went back and changed almost all the signs for all the stores. There's still a bunch of them out there that we're going to get, but that's part of our remodel program for the stores. We have red signs, we have blue signs, we have yellow signs, and we have black signs. And so it's what's the first impression. And so we're changing facades, cleaning things up, really having more of a control over what goes in the windows, not letting the store associates do their own thing, paint their windows anymore. So a lot of that's happening and evolving. So it takes a while to turn a battleship, but it's happening little by little. So again, you want something simple. You want to be visible. You don't want it all junked up. You want the customer to come in and feel like they're coming into something special. And our tagline is where creativity happens, and we want them to feel that when they come into the store.
Yes.
I think that's a really interesting question for two reasons. The first reason is that technology is coming into our lives in all ways, shapes, and forms. Social media, mobile, there's lots and lots and lots happening on the technological side. There's also lots and lots happening on the customer side. The customer is becoming smarter, got more choices, got much more access to information. I don't know if you all know, there's a concept called showrooming. And basically this is what Amazon uses the rest of us as their showrooms. And QR codes and scanning, product scanning and mobile technologies are all advances that we've all got to live with. So for example, a customer can come into my store, scan a product, and there's an application that Amazon will tell them whether they can buy it cheaper from Amazon or whether they can buy it cheaper from another retailer. So technology is really, really important to us all. It's important that we understand the direction it's going in, the advances that it's having with the customer. And it's also important to understand how the customer is using those technologies, how far ahead the customers are. And we know from my company, the customer is always ahead of us in adoption and adaptation, because we're an organization that have embedded systems, whereas the customers can throw away one mobile and buy another one with the latest technology in a matter of seconds. So all of us owe a duty of care to the customer to give them absolutely the best experience that we possibly can, utilizing the available technologies that we can afford, that we can embed into our systems, processes, and procedures, but also really sort of embrace technology as a natural step for the customer to use, a natural extension of customer information, a natural extension how to communicate with the customer. And Facebook and Twitter are two other examples, both that you can use both in-store and out of store. A really important part of the experience, I think.
And I would just like to add, I think the world is mobile, so you have to adapt to that. And I think one of the things for our company, a majority of our product is designed in-house, so it's private brand. So there really is not a lot of comparative product out there. But I would say that we have to, the minute somebody comes in and sees something or sees something they like or they don't like, it's on Pinterest, it's on any of the Facebook. So you've got to know that good things get out there fast and bad things get out there fast, and you really need to make sure that you're addressing that and making it easy for the customer. The other thing is trying to create the environment where the customer, the more time the customer spends in your store, the more they buy. So the more fun they're having, the more things they're doing, the more interest they have in the store, the better off the experience is going to be. And they're going to go tell more people that this is a great experience and I found what I'm looking for. On the other hand, when they can't find it, then they also will abandon that sale. So most people have an allocation of time that says, I've allocated 20 minutes to this purchase at Michael for my kid's project. And if I can't find that product in that 20 minutes, I'm leaving. Now, I might have only found 2 of the 5 things that I wanted, and I'm leaving with those 2, or I might even just leave those 2 and leave and go take the time someplace else to go do that shop. So I think the mobile apps really say, where is it, how do you navigate the stores, how can I help you, and how can I speed that time? Because really, I think net, we're all selling time first to the customer, product second.
On your development schedule, are you national architects, in-house architects, contractors, are they national? And during construction phase, do you separate construction from the live store so the customers aren't involved? How do you handle all those fun things?
Yeah, it's, from our perspective, looking at whether it's a national rollout or if it's an independent single event remodel, really depends on where we go with who we use. So for example, if we have a single project, not necessary for us to use a national organization. If we're using a complete rollout across the country, across 240 stores, then you're really sort of into somebody who has the kind of resources to be able to do that. So it really depends. It's horses for courses, who we use, why we use them, based again on scale and scope.
And we'll actually get into that in a little bit as we go through the execution phase and the planning phase. We'll talk a little bit more with these guys and how that plays out. Let's transition. So we've defined what a remodel is. Let's assume that inside the walls of each of your organizations, you've developed a concept of a project. Let's take that further, one step further in the charter approval process. Let's move that conceptual project through the capital process or whatever financial process exists to move it into a real project that gets executed. To start, I guess, John Wyatt, if you would give us a high-level overview of what that process looks like inside of Michael's, what are the key steps that you work through to move a project from concept to reality?
Well, again, you had asked me a question. I don't believe I answered it, but I look at the cosmetic remodels as really something that's give us a return maybe of 5 to 6% for about 6 to 8 months. The longer term is you're adding that business, you're going to get maybe an 18 to 24-month return. So the first thing in any capital investment is what's the return going to be and how long is it going to be? And that's the questions that any good finance group will ask any real estate development group every day. So we're really going to look at the return and then kind of understand, what's the capital allocation for that year for those projects? What do we want to do? A balance between new store growth, relocations, remodels, and I think then we'll put that together, put the scope together. We have a capital appropriations committee that I go present our scope to, and I'll get approval on that and then go forward. And they'll ask the questions, and once that's gone, we're off to the races. We try to make it as simple as possible.
John, and for your organization?
For us, it's once we're through concept phase and if you like the go trigger has been pulled, all of a sudden it gets very real very quickly. In my organization, we want to build a store that was designed yesterday, not a store that was designed 6 months ago. So for us, it's all about being market relevant. What are the latest ideas, the greatest ideas, and how can you get them to market as fast as possible? Maintaining quality and cost as key parameters. But there are lots of people involved. There are lots of processes involved. This is not just the John show who goes along and waves a magic wand and all of a sudden things happen. Lots of very smart people, great ideas, lots of very important processes that we have to go through to get it right. And ultimately, you have to execute in a live customer environment, or you're going to close the store down, and that's a key decision also. But in any instance, the need for speed is very, very real in retail. KPIs and performance measurements is all part and parcel of of a process. And the process can be as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. What we tend to do is look at the outcome and design a process that will deliver that outcome, as opposed to following a standard process and then the outcome is whatever it is based upon the process. So we're very dynamic in that way. And so we have lots and lots of groups: real estate, operations, IT, finance, all these various different groups of people are involved. But it's really a matter of how many times do they touch that project, how many times that project has to go for review or tasking or whatever it is in that particular group. And then what are the handoff processes? How does it get from finance to get to operations? How does it get from operations to IT? How does it get from IT to graphics? What are all these touch points and handover points? And the more you can take out in terms of complexity, the more streamlined and smooth it's going to be. The fewer times you can review the thing and have the decision made again and again and again, the more secure and stable your processes are going to be. And so really it's not about whizzing through it and paying scant attention to these things. It's really about being very, very focused on when it's in front of you, when it's your turn to review, when it's your job to complete that task. Given everything that project needs are 100% of your attention, and move on.
And I would just tell you that mine's a little bit different in that I found that when the process is very linear, it takes a long time. So what we do is we really get input from real estate group or the operations. Basically, they'll say, hey, I've got a store that really needs some help. Can you go take a look at it? Or the new stores that come in, there's going to be a relocation. So that's the input that comes in. I'm also responsible for the space planning and merchandising the stores. So my team gets that, they get the floor plan, they kind of lay it out, say, all right, how much merchandise are we going to be able to get in here, how is it going to look out? And then we have what we call a CAD meeting, which basically I bring everybody in at the beginning. So I get the designers in, I get the real estate people in, I get the finance people, and I make sure that they're all in that process so we can talk about what we're going to do. Once that's done, then everybody can kind of go do their thing, but that process continues. So I don't have to keep stopping every time and backing up. So everybody's in the beginning, they know what they're supposed to do, and then they move it forward. And then once that's out, then we'll go through the finalization of the project. So for example, you might say, well, why would you have finance in there? Well, try to explain it to them later on. That's going to slow down the process. Bring them in so they understand the scope in the beginning, and it moves much more expeditiously. So I like to bring everybody in, have everybody part of the group. Sometimes people say, well, why are all these people here? Sometimes we'll have 30 people in a meeting, but we're going through that. I'm helping to drive that meeting, and once it's done, we're off to the races, because time is of the essence for all these things. We were talking about this earlier. There's a window. Usually in the budgeting process, the beginning of the year, you get your budgets together and everybody says, all right, go. But in retailing that, oh, by the way, don't touch this period because this is an important period for us in the store. And by the way, 2 months later, don't touch this period because this is important. So you've got certain windows. So when we don't close down, we work at night. We work at night and late on weekends and things like that. So we never shut down, but the minute the store closes, we're standing right there until that store opens up. So that's our process.
John, you had mentioned...
I had a quick question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious to see if your need dictates the capital, or does the capital dictate how much you can get done? For us, there's an allocated amount of money that we can spend, so then we have to prioritize where we're going to spend the money. Because I think earlier you said you go evaluate your stores and then you go in for funds. I would imagine that's not unlimited.
No, I think what we do, the annual process, we go over all of our stores from all the regions with all the regional vice presidents on an annual basis and try to assess each one of them. Where's the need going to be? Is it in a top performing store or is it a low performing store? And again, companies, you could spend all the revenue you generate on remodeling stores, but you really have to allocate a certain portion of that dollar to that store, the improvement of your brand on an ongoing basis. So, you might say I've got 10 or 20% of the capital allocation to remodels, and that's what you have to work with. And so you're not going to get it all done in 1 year. Number one, you probably wouldn't have the manpower to do it, nor the time. But so I would say, yeah, you're right. We kind of decide what are the pressing needs, and then you kind of allocate a certain portion of your EBITDA every year to remodels.
Go ahead. Yep.
how do you get across to your finance guys that the value of upgrading your brand?
Well,
Upgrading the
kill
brand,
'em.
that's an
No,
interesting one.
no, I
Something, you know, it's a number crunching for them.
yeah.
Yeah,
They look at numbers and
yeah,
it's really difficult to tell them, you guys,
Yeah.
sooner or later this is going to get over.
yeah. I think this is an important question, and you do at some point have to face the investment decision. And the matrix are there. And John's mentioned, you know, payback periods and everything else. This is really, really important for commitments for us all to make, because if you are not smart about your investments, you won't be able to track that investment, and you won't be able to prove the return, and you certainly won't, at the end of the year, be able to say, well, that $1 million that I invested, guess what? It's going to generate 1.2 or 1.1, whatever it is in revenue. You're going to be saying, I don't really know, right? I don't know. So it's really, really important not to crack at some point. But just backtrack for a moment to the point that John made, which I really agree with, is if you get everybody on board at the point that the vision is being created, and they understand the vision that you're going to go forward with within that financial year, and they know that part of their role is going to be crunching those numbers and proving that vision and challenging elements of that vision in order to be able to shape it and form it. Because it starts off as a cloud, as we all know, and it sort of gradually gets whittled down to, you know, something more box-like, which has a set time, a set cost, a set quality, a set scope, a set this, a set that. And so it's really important that we get to that framework, but it really does start with, you know, John talking to 30 people in a room and saying, listen, guys, we're going to go in this direction.
The other point I would like to make here is that I think when you, again, it goes back to remodels being pretty, how to, you know, let's just hug each other and hold, and this is going to be really, and it, you know, let's spend more money on this store because, you know, it'll make us feel good, or is it going to drive additional business? And I would say the finance guys are usually the ones, once you do a remodel that drives additional business, they're what, how fast can you do more of these? And seriously, and I'm having that situation right now. We're doing remodels that are coming out of the blocks and doing significantly better than anybody expected. And they're going, how many more can you do and how fast can you do them? And so I think that's part of it, getting them on board, having them understand the scope of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then, and it makes sense. That's exactly what they're looking for. And they want to be partners in it. I mean, they love it. They come over. We're in different buildings, and the finance guys love to live in our building because they like to see what's going on and help drive the business. They want to be part of driving a business as opposed to just counting money.
I think there's a really important role for the operators here as well. The actual execution, the field team. They're involved in the same conversation. The finance guys, depending on how dry they are, might just give you the numbers, right? But it's the poor old operator who's got to make those sales on a daily, hourly basis. They're the ones who've got to drive sales post-remodel. So if they don't believe in the vision, if they don't believe in the numbers, then you can't motivate them either. So there's a really important symbiotic relationship between the cold, hard facts that the backroom finance guys might, you know, love. But the reality of retail is that it's extremely dynamic, it's customer-facing, and it's all about selling.
And you know you're making a transition when they start contributing to the design. And you know you've got them. You've got them. That hook has been set, and they want to see their ideas out there. So that's really good.
We got a question in the back here.
Yeah, our sales operations guys obviously want the higher volume stores done. That's kind of their priority. How do you make sure that you're not neglecting the stores that aren't higher volume and make sure that they're getting done and not pushed by the wayside every year that your remodel budget comes up?
I think you can look at it two ways. In my early career, I looked at the bottom 10% of the stores every year, trying to remodel those and bring those up. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and there's not enough revenue that they generate to do much else with. So what I've looked at is more of how do you drive business in the top performing stores, because that really is the #1 face to your brand. That's your cash cow. And let the revenue off of the better stores, which basically any incremental dollars you get pretty much drops directly to the bottom line. Get that to pay for the remodels of the bottom 10%. And you know, if you can do that, you drive the top, you drive the middle, which is your cash cow, and then you can pick up the bottom. And then really you want to, you know, eject the bottom 10%. Every year you should be looking at the bottom 10% and saying, how do I get rid of this or turn this thing around? If you can't get them up, then you should get rid of them. But I think that top third or 25% of stores really is your cash cow. It's your brand, face to the brand. That's what you really, if you can't do it there, you're not going to do it any other of the other levels of stores.
We got a question right in the middle here.
What about remodels as a defensive strategy? Whereas competitors say moves into an adjacent shopping center or is in the same concentric circle, and you have an old, tired location there that needs to respond to that.
I think there are two key elements to what you're saying is really how do we defend ourselves against competitor activity, and then how do we, if you like, protect ourselves from a landlord marching into us and saying, we're going to demol or remodel, right? We're going to massively invest in this, and we want your space at the end of term because we've got Apple's coming to town, right? Bang, all changes. So the defensive remodeling, I don't think is a sustainable strategy. I think if you're not going to be prepared to invest in that market, then you should have an exit strategy. So investing for defensive purposes is not something I think is going to take you very far. I think it is going to take you far if a moment in time comes when a mall, for example, has attracted some new blood. He's trying to revitalize the mall or the location, wherever it is, and then he might come to you and say, "We're going to move you at the end of your term to a location which isn't so fantastic. It's just off the food court, and you're going to be in with the burgers and the no offense to burgers, but burgers and books don't really go together." So again, I use the word "it depends" a lot because it does. It depends. But my overall response would be I don't believe in defensive investments.
It's kind of like chasing your tail. So you should have been there anyways, but if you're going to remodel, just understand that if you remodel before the competitor comes in, you've got a better chance of keeping the customer than you do afterwards, because in all the studies I've done of our different brands I've been with, if you remodel after that competitor has come in, the customer basically has been with you, they say, oh, this store is old and tired, or the restaurant's old and tired. They leave you, they go someplace else, I really like this. Why would I want to go back to that previous concept? If you can remodel before the competitor comes in, that customer might go over, if they've liked your customer service, they've been a loyal customer for a long period of time, they go over to the new brand over there, and then they go, well, that wasn't really any better than what I had, and they'll come back. So I see that there's a little lull about 6 months that they kind of abandon you, but they will come back. But if you haven't done anything before that, pretty much you're going to lose about 20% of your business.
Regarding the remodel, I'm assuming you're talking about the new concepts in your stores. It's nothing to do with refreshes, correct? Which is somebody decides we're going to go refresh the store, keep the design the same, just make it a maintenance project. Is that correct?
In my business, I mentioned earlier on, there are three sort of areas that we would consider remodeling. One is really product-based, as I mentioned earlier on. One is a sort of middle market remodel, and the other one is where you're going to go and rip everything out and completely fit it out.
Let's talk about the new concepts. Do you guys in your companies have the luxury of testing the new concept?
Yes.
From especially like from the architectural design of products and such.
Yeah.
Do you have a store somewhere that you play with to get approvals on design from the big heads?
Yeah, yeah. We definitely believe in the test store, and like a lot of retailers, we test everything. We like to test everything, we like to measure everything, and we like to monitor everything, and then we like to contemplate. We don't always have the luxury of time, so sometimes that happens in a very compressed period. But the bottom line is we need the feedback from the market in order to tell us what's working and what's not working. And ultimately, they don't buy fixtures or lighting from us, they buy the product. So if the product isn't isn't the absolute center of everybody's attention, then we're doing something wrong, right? So I feel like a design and construction person, I'm in service to the retail industry. I'm in service to the product placement and the overall customer experience. And so if I go to market with a brand new concept, I've got to really contemplate the effect of that new concept on my existing customers or any new customers that I'm trying to attract. Because I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I want to build my business. I'm trying to elevate not just one or two categories. I'm trying to elevate everything.
Well, my question related to the architecture of the wow factor that was mentioned. Like, where is your store that you play with? I'm not talking about an actual store. Do you have physically under your office a store? Do you have the luxury to do that?
Yes, we have a live store that we go in and we'll do, just like John does, overnight we'll do mini changes on a constant basis, and it's a live store. It's open the next day for business.
Awesome.
And I have about 20,000.
Yeah.
I have about 20,000 square feet sitting right underneath my floor, which all the merchants are in and laying everything out, and we have all the new fixturing that we bring in. But I probably have about 20% of my stores that something's in test right now. So I will get things out there. It's no better test than the customer. You know, you can. There's not a good test in-house. The best test for retailers out in the field. So when you look at new cash wraps, when you look at new lighting, you look at new floor colors, you look at new bathroom fixtures, things like that, the best place is to get it out and into the store. So we just continue to push that.
Well, I think it's very important to stress that point, is to have a place to play for your designers, your construction managers, for suppliers to play. We've been fortunate, like you said, I've got like 3 actual stores, no customers entered that I play with.
Yeah, but right now, I mean, I probably have, going right now, probably 20 stores right now that I have something new going into each one of those stores. In-house, we have this big space that we use all our new fixtures in, but that to me is not a test. That's just really more of like a layout. What's it going to look like, as opposed to a test. The tests are really out in the field, and we're continuing taking stores ongoing basis, and I have an idea, like, all right, here's where we're going to put it. And fortunately, I'm the guy who has to decide that, so it's nice to.
Well, you're fortunate. Our CEO is the guy who wants to see it first.
Yeah.
This is actually a really good transition into the next topic that we want to talk about, and that is the planning and development. So we've worked through navigating the internal process of charter and approval. You've got a project. Now you're putting the fine edges on what it is exactly you're going to do in a store, in a group of stores. How do you go about physically defining the scope of work? How do you go about physically defining the budget? And then as part of the planning development process, what are the risks that you're really focused on before you roll into execution?
I think defining the scope is probably the most difficult, simply because in the constant changing world of retail, scope today isn't necessarily going to be scope tomorrow. A new product might come to market, or your merchants might walk in one day and say, I want you to start selling this table, not just the glass of water that's on it. And it can change lots and lots of things. It's the proverbial stone in the pond with the ripples. So defining scope is really, really important. And I think what you have to do is you have to have really an approach to what I call dynamic scope, which means that you're assuming and you're anticipating that the scope will change. And your processes have to absorb and be able to flex when that does change. Simply because the categories are not stable. Even sort of old technologies that we sell, like books, you think, okay, well, a book's just a book, but it's far more complex than that. In my business, we don't control product development. That comes from the authors. We don't control price. That comes from the publishers. So if something changes in either of those two worlds, then it can have a dramatic change on scope. So scope definition, I think, is the key thing.
How about on the risk side, John? What do you guys, when you're in the planning and development stage of a project or a process, what risk factors are you really thinking through based on past experience or things you see out in the future?
I think number one is the key condition of the store. When you get in there, you think you're going to have a plan, and then you start tearing up floors and find out they're all rotted, and it's much more extensive. than you expected. And then I think really making sure that you get the return that you're planning in that number. Otherwise, you're not going to get the confidence of the people to go forward. So it's really based on, we've had some stores that we weren't allowed to go in to scope those stores prior to taking over the space. And then you kind of open it up and you're like, wow, why did I take this space on? It's really a mess and it's going to cost me, $100,000 more than I planned. So those are the things that kind of throw the loop, and then it blows your IRR and you're kind of like stuck. So you have to say, all right, what else am I going to do that? So I really believe in getting out there and scoping projects prior to doing it, spending the money to do that, spending the time for people to travel to go see, and bringing in people that really know what they're talking about. And so we'll do better scoping to begin with, better planning, and then I think in the end get a better result.
How about long lead risks? Materials and merchandising and all of the fixturing and the stuff that needs to go inside of a store. Some of those have quite long lead times and require early commitment.
Yeah.
I think strategic procurement is a challenge for everybody, really. The minute you start trying to do a deal with a third-party organization in the supply chain that you're functioning, no matter how familiar you might be with that particular product, when you get right down to the manufacturing and the raw materials components, so much can change. Just basic materials like MDF, prices can be influenced one way or another. Oil prices can affect the fuel service charges of your delivery. Lots and lots of things can create volatility. So your long lead-in times, really, glass, for example, we refitted a store and we had 15 feet high sheets of glass that we had to order. Well, guess what? No one in Canada makes them. You've got to come over to the border and buy them from the US. Well, there's only 4 companies in the US that makes 15-foot high pieces of glass. So straight away, the concept, it sounds absolutely fantastic, but where the hell are you going to buy this stuff? How the hell are you going to get it from the factory when you do find it, through the distributor, through your GC perhaps, or a specialist contractor, to site and installed? And so strategic sourcing, I think, is really, really important. That coupled with clustering. Can you cluster projects? Can you go with volume purchases? Can you maximize your buying power? And that will help when it comes to securing deals, getting the attention of your suppliers, particularly when you're dealing with one-off items.
And then we have a lot of long lead items in our stores. We pretty much go direct through our own team. And there are certain vendors we'll look at, we'll prioritize those things we can change. I mean, for example, when I want to start changing a prototype, I've probably got a year of inventory that I've got to eat first to get through before I can start seeing those changes out there. So what I've done is pretty much prioritize what are the big items that I really need to have, long lead items, and then what are the ones that I don't need to really go commit for a year and can kind of go a little bit shorter term, so that if the look changes or the colors change, that I can transition with that. Right now I'm in a transition of changing fixture colors, and there was almost a year's worth of inventory to go through prior to changing the fixtures. And I want to get all these looks in, but it's like, you own this stuff, you got to deal with it. So then it's like layered, how can I change things? So I can change graphics, I can't change fixture colors, but I can change the graphic colors, I can change tile colors, I can change queuing colors. So those are the kind of things I can say, how do I incorporate what I have for the year term that I have to deal with, and then can continue to evolve it, knowing that these things are longer lead items, but they'll plop right in and then be able to fit. So,
I've got a question right there.
Hi, how do you plan for ADA improvements, and how is that baked into the scope of work and budget?
Well, we're continuing to scope all of our stores for ADA and looking at what we need to do and starting to make a lot of those changes out there. The newer stores are already adapted, but it's the older ones we have that aren't. And so as we go back for every remodel, we've basically pretty much done a scope of all of our stores to understand what needs to be done as we go back and do that.
So we have 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes. There are 2 things that I think we really want to cover, and I think they're important points, and it's based on some of our earlier conversations in preparation for this. And One of the points is in program execution. So the project has gone through the planning stage and now we're delivering that project in the field. We talked a lot about the importance of communication and not only what you're communicating, but who you're communicating to. Do you guys want to share some insight into that communicative process and the essentials during project execution as it relates to those points?
I think this is really where the relationships, the in-house relationships are really tested. On the one hand, you have, let's call them the professional group, the architects, the surveyors, the cost managers, the project managers, the people who are in the construction industry as a profession. And then you have the other groups, the people who are in retail as a profession, the field team, the operations team, the people who are actually there to sell. The interaction and interplay between these two groups is really, really, really important. And it's absolutely imperative that everybody understands what's expected of them and what they can expect from the project. And I think once you have a real sort of transparent process and full accountability where everybody knows what their job is and what everybody else can expect from them, then I think you really set a tone for vibrant communication.
I mean, communication is the key. Projects fail. An average project that has poor communication usually kills the budget by about 20%. Just that's what I've seen. So if you get somebody, what I like is what I call single source responsibility. Give me somebody that if I can pick up the phone and make one phone call, there's an issue, that's who I can call. We try to do the same thing with our teams. We put an in-house team in, maybe 1 or 2 people, and that's the key point of contact. I don't want people talking to everybody in the store, every store manager, every day, and if there's somebody new and somebody has a new bright idea. It's like, no, here's the person, it's single source, don't pay attention to anybody other than this person, and I want the same thing from all the vendors so that I know we have an issue, we need to be able to get to it, and then you get clear communication, it expedites the process, everybody feels good, and I think it gets done in a much more efficient time frame.
Yeah. As it relates to that single source responsibility, we actually were talking last night relative to the importance of quality control and superintendents on the job site and having an experienced person there. Yeah. Do you want to share some thoughts on that?
Golden rule for me: if you have a good site supervisor, you're going to get a good job. If you have a bad site supervisor, look out. I've only been doing this for 30 years, so I don't know a lot. But there are certain mantras that I hold dear, and that is the how embedded, how engaged, how embraced, how focused is the person who's in charge of what's going on in the store or on the site. And if you have somebody who's absolutely 100% engaged and jazzed by that project and determined to do a great job, you will get a first-class job, because that person will make up for poor communication, bad planning, poor scheduling. They'll make up for all of these deficiencies. They really will. They can't do everything, but when it comes to on-site execution, which is what hits the stores, it's what touches your consumers, and it's ultimately what drives value from the project itself.
One of the things I would tell you, though, a couple months ago, I was walking into a remodel project that was ongoing, and I really want teams. What I realized is I need to have teams that, from the vendor community, that really have a feel for what the customer is experiencing. Because I would walk into a store, and the guy's got his ladder and he's drilling concrete right over the entry door. He's got his ceiling tiles stacked in the entry. He's got drywall dust all over the place. His pants are down to his knees. He looks like they rolled him out of the gutter. And it's like, that's what's the face to my brand. And I pulled the guy aside into meeting him, and I just said, let's talk about this stuff. And I went through the whole thing. I said, do you really want that? Is that what you want the customer to see about your company? And he's like, no. The next day, I came back. The guy clean's got a clean shirt. He's clean shaven. He's got the whole place cleaned up. And I'm like, that's the kind of vendors I want. I want the vendor who care about themselves, because if they're caring about themselves, I know they'll care about me. Yeah. And if they don't, then I really don't need them.
Let's open it up. We have 5 minutes, so we'll open it up for questions.
So in response or in relationship to both of your comments about subcontractors and all, and that they are really kind of the face of the brand during that process, how much of a part do your in-house project managers play, or do you really give that responsibility to the vendor through the project?
I think you can delegate a certain amount of responsibility to your vendors, but ultimately, in my instances, if this is my project, then it's my responsibility. I can delegate responsibility, but I can't delegate accountability. It's still my project. I still have to own it, at whatever level I am. We do employ project managers, in-house project managers, and we have a small core team of really hard-working, very busy project managers. That's the way I like them. I don't like them sitting around waiting for something to do. But ultimately, we've worked very, very hard to build a supplier network that buys into what we're trying to do. So buys into the relationship that we want with our consumer when we go and remodel a store. And yes, to John's point, there's going to be drywall dust, and there's going to be noise, and there's going to be sparks, and there's going to be all these different things on a normal construction site. And you have to keep the two separate. You have to separate your customer physically, because of safety reasons, from the activities. That doesn't mean you don't have a glass wall so they can all see what's going on and get excited and jazzed about it. But ultimately, there are certain responsibilities and certain accountabilities that you don't want to pass on to your suppliers and vendors. And there are many that you do. And I think it's up to you to define that, to draw that line in the sand, and be clear with them, and allow them the opportunity to really buy into the project and their responsibilities in such a way that they're going to have a lot of fun working for you.
I would tell you that I really look at a partnership with the vendors. Maybe have like, each project manager in my area probably has 25 to 30 some projects. There's no way that they're going to get to that all over the country. So we really look at a partnership with the different vendors. I want to build a long-term relationship with the vendors. I want them to know what I'm thinking before I'm thinking it. I want them to know what we're thinking. We try to come together every year with all of our vendors to say, what are we doing wrong? What can we learn? What can we do better? What's coming out there as new products? You guys are the eyes and ears of what's out there in the industry, and for us to think that we are the smartest people in the world, forget it. We have an idea, continue what our vision is, but I think you guys can help us an awful lot. So we really look for that partnership, and I look at the broader we can be, the more we can get done. So that's, again, I go back to time is of the essence, and how do you best get it done? You can't hire all the people you need in-house to get the work done when you're in a growth mode. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind.
We have 1 minute.
We can squeeze in one more question if you guys would like. Anybody?
I have one question as well. So.
Oh.
Both talked about the importance of speed to market, and you both have stores, across the country, respective countries. How are you dealing with the issue of governmental entities and getting permits and sign-offs as you're trying to meet that deadline? If you're going to open on Monday, you still have to have the inspector come in and sign off on it.
Well, I tell you, sometimes it's very difficult. There was a situation, I won't say what part of the country, that probably the process should have been about a 6-week remodel, and it took almost 8 months. And I found that I had screw inspectors, drywall inspectors, stud inspectors, ceiling tile inspectors. So I had to kind of go out and figure out what's going on. And I found out that every time the inspector came, they charged $75. And this was the edict from the city as to how they could drive additional revenue, but they were making it extremely difficult. So I ended up having to go down there. Really kind of had to bite my tongue the whole time until it was done, but then kind of let them know that we're not coming back with any other stores in this area if this is the way it's going to be. I think you really we try to get in early, try to get them again to be partners, tell them what we're doing, what we're trying to, and get all their input up front, so it's not a surprise. What I do find in the cities is there's, you think you got approval from somebody, and then the next day it's somebody else's thinks that they're the authority. So we'd kind of like some clarity working with the cities. But I think it's really just trying to be a partner up front. Some people want to be difficult. Most communities I find want to be helpful and want to help drive business in. So we try to really get up front. My guys, the first thing they do is to go into the communities, even before we start building any store, is say, here's what we're thinking, here's our plans, or any things we need to watch out for. Get that incorporated into our project and our costs so we can understand that. But then there's, you always get the certain loops that throw you, so.
We take a very similar approach. As much as possible, we try to do the code reviews as far ahead of time as possible. So we're anticipating where the issues might be, where the challenges might be. But we take a very similar approach to landlord's consent that we do with building control or planning consent or any other bylaw consent. And that really is try to understand it as early as possible and try to get the application in as early as possible. And I would rather have an application that's been deposited that is incorrect than wait for the correct one, because I would rather deal with an amendment at the end, having been given a permit, than not.
The last question that I had was really about taking the lessons that we learn in projects and moving them into the future for future projects. And so how do you guys inside of your organizations leverage lessons learned from past projects into future projects? Do you have formal process? Do you have ways to do that?
Yeah, part of our closeout is we have lessons learned, and that is basically a series of meetings, normally 3 meetings, that is actually not driven by the project manager. It's actually driven by a third-party group. So it's very, very independently focused, and it's really an amnesty. It's what we're trying to do is root out what was good, what was bad, and what was really ugly. And what are the lessons learned? Can we implement and execute lessons? Can we change processes? Can we improve things? Are there people who need development? Like, let's just call it out. And so we try to, as much as possible, have a very open framework. It's not always possible with every issue, but that's our attempt. And our first approach to lessons learned is at the point of turnover, and then it's at the end of the deficiency period, and then it's at the end of 3 months after the project or store has been operating for 3 months.
We call ours a COE meeting, correction of errors. So we get together, go through it all. And what I have our guys do, I really don't care about what happened in the past. I care about what we're doing now and what are we going to do to correct it going forward. And so I really try to have them correct and put all these errors that happen by categories. So if there's architectural issues, if there's design issues, if there's installation issues, we try to categorize them so that when my team's looking for projects going forward, they're going, all right, there's what happened last time, what do we need to watch out for? So they can use that as a guide going forward, instead of like, we're just gonna, try to kill somebody or bash them in because they made a mistake. It's like more of, what do we do, what are we learning from this, and how are we gonna take it going forward? So just use it as a positive. How do you make sure you don't repeat the mistakes over and over? And that's really what I try to drive to our teams is, we just don't want to repeat the same mistake. That's, shame on us if we continue to do that. How do we get this corrected going forward so, all of us need fewer issues. So the more we can get that corrected and going forward, the better off we are.
Good.
And remember, something will always go wrong. So you just might as well accept it. So.
All right, so I'm going to have to cut it here. Thank you guys very much. A reminder too, Josh is going to be facilitating a roundtable on this topic tomorrow afternoon at 12:15. So any additional questions you might have, come tomorrow.
Bring them. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.